So it seems that Games Workshop has unleashed the next Warhammer 40k roadmap, with the next codexes confirmed. The next batch after that give us some conspicuous clues, and then on the horizon we've got a whole bunch of cryptic hints and teasers, though all of them look like they have a pretty good explanation. Let's talk through the codex roadmap bit by bit, and what's coming over the next year for Warhammer 40k. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where it's been a busy day for Warhammer 40k news. We had the massive reveal of the Emperor's Children in the early hours, which I covered in the previous video. But also it seems that Games Workshop has pretty well set out the roadmap for the rest of 10th edition, and we've got a pretty good idea when every single codex in 10th is going to drop in order. Their teasers actually had really quite a lot of hints. In total, between the Emperor's Children things and a short section of video, we know that the 3 big release wave ones are going to be coming in really quite short order. Then the Deity Codexes are going to be after that, with another really strong hint that demons are going to be split up and divided into their deity legions. They showed off the new model for the Death Guard, though we already have some massive hints as to what's coming for the Thousand Sons and the World Eaters. And then after that they gave us so many teasers that we can basically sort of round up the rest of the codexes of 10th edition. 3 more codexes basically confirmed to be coming after the Deity Codexes. A really interesting hint for Space Marines getting something as well, which is maybe one of the more unusual things. And then after that they had a silhouette teaser that wasn't obvious to me at the time of recording, but the clever people of the internet quickly put it together, and it perfectly matches the artwork of one faction that seemed likely to be getting a release wave. And then that leaves us only with 2 more codexes as well, so we basically know that they're coming last. I did quite like the way that they did this roadmap as well, rather than wasting our time with around about 10 minutes worth of waffle. They just dove straight into it and gave us the hints and teasers. It was just so much more of a feel-good feeling compared with the rather nebulous one that they did last time round, where they basically announced Aeldari and Deathcore of Krieg model release waves, but managed to do so in such a way that it maybe annoyed people as much as it gave them hype just by talking mainly about patting themselves on the back. Let's jump into it though and go through that schedule bit by bit. We already know the codexes that are going to have to be updated for 10th edition. We've got Astra Militarum, Aeldari and Imperial Knights, Space Wolves, Black Templars, Grey Knights, Death Guard, Thousand Sons and World Eaters alongside the Emperor's Children, Chaos Knights, Drukhari and Leaders of Votann. Most of these were really quite likely to be coming out within the next 12 months anyway. We know how Games Workshop tend to do their rolls out of things over the edition, and only a few things are likely to get a book shortly before they jump into 11th edition. Usually with these we either get a full release wave or the standard codex rollout, and the standard ones tend to get 1 character release, a new combat patrol that's often worse, and a Battle Force launch box as a discount box to jump into the army. For the next few months though, it looks like it's going to be a spectacularly busy release wave for Warhammer 40k. They're billing Aeldari, Guard and Emperor's Children all as now, and to me that strongly implies that it's going to be within the next 3 months at the very least. Now that does seem like an unusually hectic release schedule for Games Workshop, particularly given that all the way over 2024 we only really had 3 release waves: Dark Angels, Cruise and Blood Angels. They were the only major releases for Warhammer 40k that got lots of kits for each faction. It sounds like we're getting around about as much as that in the early stage of 2025. Out of those 3, it looks like they've put Aeldari on the top left, kind of softly implying that they might be the first ones to get new content next. I was suspecting that they might well have leapfrogged the Guard due to the Guard's sort of limbo period, where they have their launch box come out, then they have a delay, and then they have their full codex release. For the Aeldari, we're already seeing a massive amount of models that are coming for them. Given that we didn't see anything else at this big preview that they've done, it seems unlikely they're getting anything else. We've got the new Warp Spiders and their new Phoenix Lord Lycus, the new Swooping Hawks and Baharoth. I must admit I really think that they've done absolutely spectacularly with the new Phoenix Lords. Baharoth and Lycus are amazing, and the Warp Spiders and Swooping Hawks I think are really nicely updated. Finally we've got the Fire Dragons along with Fugan, who we already saw when he leaked, and Azaman coming for the Dire Avengers, but looks like no updates to their plastic kit at least as of yet. That'll all be along with a Codex release, and I'd be very surprised if we don't get a Battle Force or 2 along with them, though it seems unlikely that they'll actually get a launch box in the same style as the Death Corps or the Emperor's Children, as they haven't talked about one yet. Then after Aeldari we have the Guard. We've already had their Deathcore Kree launch box go out and then sell out pretty fast around the world, but following up with that we'll have the more general release with everything going up individually: Heavy Weapons Command Squads plus the Combat Patrol. It looks like while the Deathcore of Krieg launch box really was quite popular, in the polls that I did on the channel it looks like the heavy weapon teams and the command squads have just as much demand individually, if not more. I think there's quite a lot of people who want to pick up some of the individual units but didn't necessarily want as many riders as came in the big launch box for the Krieg. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people looking to get their hands on the artillery team. That's probably the one that I'm most likely to eye out for my Guard. We're also getting the Combat Patrol with Drayden's Lance, though I feel like they're not going to sell quite as many of those as the Krieg things. Then finally on this close range teaser, they've got the new Emperor's Children, which are also billed as now. It looks like they'll be coming out after the Astra Militarum, and I guess they'll have their launch box first and then full codex release after, as is the norm. I'm not sure if they might do something a little bit different with Fulgrim's launch as well. They had the weird small launch box with Lionel Johnson and the Blade Guard last time around. I don't know if they might do something similar given that he's not in the launch box, or just save him for the main codex release. He's going to be a model in some mad demand when the box comes out though. We've just seen all the good stuff for them. They're going to be coming out with the Champions of Slaanesh box set with their Troops Choice, their Lord and all the Noise Marines. This one's likely to be priced in a similar sort of style to the Krieg one, unless they manage to fit in a cheeky price rise between then. And then the other miniatures that will be coming out, besides the ones in that box, are Fulgrim himself, the Lord Cacophonist, the Flawless Blades and Lucius. In the near-term codexes, that probably begs the question as to where the Imperial Knights have happened to go. In their last codex release schedule, they teased them as coming after the Aeldari, though it was a little bit odd when they mentioned them at the time, in that they said Imperial Knights and not Chaos Knights for some reason. Usually I'd expect them to come out in tandem, particularly if they might be updating some unit profiles, as we had a few leaks that suggest that they might. It is weird that they're one of the only armies that the codex roadmap doesn't seem to mention anymore. Though we did get a hint for the Chaos Knights later, so I'd guess they might turn up with them. I guess the possibilities are that either they've been shunted back a bit to just after the Deity Codex Legions, or this more recent roadmap is less good than the previous one, so I think if I had to guess, I'd suspect that the Knights might drop after the Deity Legions at this point rather than before, but I guess we'll wait and see. I'll certainly be looking forward to that one as a Knight collector myself, though I still think there's a good chance that we get them by mid-2025. They're not exactly the best news for people who were hyped for some Knight goodness. Before we move on to talk about the mid-term and late-term things, I'll just give a quick shout-out to Warhaus, the sponsors of this video. They're a new gaming store in Australia, who asked to sponsor a few videos on the channel to get the word out that they exist. They're aiming to sell Games Workshop's models at a pretty ambitious 23% off Games Workshop prices, one of the highest rates around. They're still in their slightly early days as a store at the moment, their website not long having gone live, the store itself opening sometime this month apparently, based in Corinda outside Brisbane. They do all the normal things that you'd expect of a wargaming store. They can order in Games Workshop models to get them at a discount if they have a Games Workshop model that isn't in stock. They do $10 shipping around Australia and free over $150, and a reward point scheme for returning customers for additional discounts. It also looks like they have a few of the Deathcore Krieg box sets still in stock as well at 23% off, Australia being the main place that didn't sell out quite as quickly as the rest of the world for those ones. In any case, feel free to check them out, links down in the video description. I'll link their web store on Instagram if you want to follow them if you are in the area, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Next up on the Warhammer 40k roadmap though, we've got the Deity Legion Codexes. These are billed as coming next, which does imply that they'll be after the Guard Aeldari and Emperor's Children, though as mentioned, no mention of Knights. We already had a hint as to the timing of the World Eaters Codex, which they said could be around for World Easter, and that'll be 20th of April this year. So if that is right, we've got a tentative date for roughly when we might expect these books to drop. As I previously speculated, by the last roadmap I was wondering if all the Deity Codexes might be dropping all at the same time to divide up the Chaos Demons into the 4 different books, something that they did in Age of Sigmar, and now it looks like they're doing in Warhammer 40k. And I guess they only could do it now they've got all the 4 Deity Legions up and active, as previously they wouldn't have had anywhere for the Slaanesh Demons to go. Given that it sounds like these two are coming at least kind of soon, I maybe wouldn't be too surprised if the Emperor's Children launch box perhaps drops sometime in March, and then maybe these guys could tie in with the full release of the Emperor's Children range. We could basically have a quadruple codex drop all on the same day as a great big celebration of the Ruinous Powers. I'm guessing there's a chance that these could be the codex cover artworks for them, so I guess we'll wait and see for the main reveals there. For model releases, Games Workshop have given us some really big hints and one entire model reveal for these. They gave us some massively obvious hints that the Thousand Sons could be getting some sort of automata unit, basically spelling out exactly what the unit was and what it did in the Pariah Nexus narrative that they had going on. Tech Sorcerers resurrecting some of their psychically tuned automata from the Horus Heresy, filling them full of demons and blackstone and looted Abmech things, making some sort of mechanical psychic abomination, and they help out the Legion quite a lot in areas where the warp is reduced, like the Pariah Nexus that the Necrons control. I think there's a pretty strong chance that these rumour engines that we can see on the bottom right could be that automata unit, though whether or not it's a big single model or multiple different ones, who knows. It looks like we've got these sort of blue and white Thousand Sun stripes on the shin plate of the foot on the left, and a claw that sort of matches the same sort of styling. Judging by the painting lines, they look a little bit too small to be Chaos Knights, though I guess that's also possible. For the Death Guard, we had their confirmed release being this Lord of Poxes, the third out of the named Chaos Lords along with the Virulence and Contagion ones. He's fighting with a great big massive plague weapon, a plasma pistol, and then a blight spore generator type thing that shrouds his unit in a bunch of clouds, so I'm going to guess it gives them permanent stealth or cover against enemy shooting attacks. I don't know if he's going to be replacing or updating the more standard Lord on foot, so maybe he might be the only option that you can choose to lead Plague Marines with now if you want a Lord choice. Pretty cool to see him all painted up nicely after the model leaks. Finally, for the World Eaters, the really obvious hint that we've had are Berserker Surgeons. They were all over the lore in the 9th edition release, and it seemed weird that we didn't get the model for them, so if nothing else, I feel like they'd be very odds on. They're the World Eaters apothecaries that keep the Legion at least somewhat functional as a fighting force, tending to the Butcher's nails and creating 8-bound and all that, and applying just a tiny bit of control to make sure that the Legion just doesn't devolve and destroy itself. I must admit, hot on the heels of 3 other release waves, plus dropping it around the same time as multiple other Deity Legion Codexes, I don't think it looks quite as good for a big release wave as it might have done before. Previously I was thinking that they'd be getting a second release wave in 10th edition, but hopefully they do get a few more things rather than just a single character release. Some Juggernaut Cavalry, Red Butchers Terminators or Khornate Demon Engines would all be high on the wish list, so hopefully Games Workshop can deliver for the Sons of Khorne. As mentioned though, given that these Slaanesh demons are in the Emperor's Children book, it basically seems guaranteed that they're going to have the Khorne demons folded into their book, and the same with Nurgle joining Deathguard and Tzeentch joining the Thousand Sons, and that's going to expand the Codex unit roster by really quite a massive amount for each of them. Then though, beyond the things that are confirmed, Games Workshop dropped a whole bunch of hints for things that are quote-unquote on the horizon, which I feel like just loosely translates to the next ones after that. Well, I had to look at them at the time and it seems that my initial impressions were right about the factions that they come from. They're mostly bits of current existing artwork, a few of them being Codex covers, so these ones generally aren't going to be teasing new models, but more sort of the Codexes that are coming for those factions. If that previous teaser was true and the Deity Legions do drop somewhere around Easter, then I guess like late April to early May, it means that these guys could potentially be the summer crop of Codexes, and I really wouldn't be too surprised if Games Workshop went heavy on the releases at this point, as they don't generally tend to like too many books coming out basically a year before the edition is going to end anyway and go into 11th. That'll be in summer 2026, unless Games Workshop change their cycle in some way. 3 of these basically don't really show us so much, and are basically just Codexes that we knew were coming out in the near future anyway, though the 4th one with the Space Marine is kind of interesting. Going through them in turn, and first up we have the Black Templars with their axe from their Codex cover art from 9th edition. It's quite a cool power axe, that one from their Marshal, but it means it's not any sort of hint as to the actual model that they'll get. I have said in previous videos I think it's unlikely that they get any sort of enormous release wave in 10th edition, given that they had a good crop of models in 9th and they were fairly completist about their range update. They had all the things that you'd really expect out of a Primaris update for the Black Templars with no obvious one thing missing. If I had to guess at this point, if they do get a unique character miniature, I guess it'll be something else generic, particularly given that they've already got 2 named characters plus the Emperor's Champion. Maybe a generic Chaplain could be kind of nice, perhaps a Terminator character for the Templars, or an Ancient or Banner Bearer could be nice. When I asked people what they most want to see on a Black Templars post, the general consensus was that they'd like to see a unique variant of Terminators for them, maybe something slightly Deathwing Knight style, or perhaps a more themed Redemptor Dreadnought pattern, maybe a Chaplain specific one. I feel like either of those just feels a little bit unlikely though. So far, most of the time Games Workshop seems to like either individual character releases or full release waves, and not really too much in between. Next up on the artwork teasers, we have this shin pad for the Grey Knights. Again, this one's straight from their 9th edition Codex cover. So again, more teasing the Codex I think as opposed to any individual miniature. Grey Knights are something where anything and everything's possible for them. They could have a full Codex range refresh, though again, like the World Eaters, maybe just seems a little bit unlikely given so many releases at the start of 2025, but it's still definitely possible. Even if they just decided to update the Terminators and the Stripe Marine kits, that'd be the vast majority of the range done. So far we've only had the new Castellan Crow at the new slightly more upscaled Primaris era scaling for them. I feel like they've got fairly strong possibilities whether or not they just go for an individual character or 2 or the full range. I guess if it's just the one character, I'd probably put most money on either Stern, Drago, or a generic Grandmaster or Brother Captain. All of those feel like pretty solid bets. I feel like Stern is maybe the most in need at the moment, and if they wanted to go for hyping up a minor character that they haven't paid too much attention to for a little while, he seems like a really good choice. A new plastic generic HQ to lead the faction really seems like another very good choice though, just from practicality. I guess not too long until we see the Grey Knights book though, and we already knew 100% that it was coming in 2025 as Games Workshop had confirmed that before in a different post. Up third we have the Chaos Knights, and if this one is from current artwork from them, I haven't been able to place it. It could be a minor bit from the Codex somewhere that maybe just isn't quite as shared as well on the internet, or it could be new artwork that's coming out alongside the Codex, potentially even the Codex cover. In any case, we can see a Wardog Carnivore in the background, and I'm a little bit uncertain as to whether the chainsword in the foreground is either another Wardog Carnivore up close, or perhaps the bigger Rampager. In any case, it's absolutely certainly Chaos Knights, with seemingly like there's a few guardsmen trying to hold them back down below, who probably aren't in the best place trying to hold back a Chaos Knight advance. It's definitely not 100% guaranteed, but I'd be kind of surprised if they didn't drop both Knights books at the same time. It just kind of makes sense if they're going to make any sort of overarching changes to a few of the different stat lines. And we did get a dual release back in 9th edition, though it doesn't mean it will happen this time necessarily. There's a fair few ways that they could expand for both factions. The Imperial Knights could definitely enjoy some more armiger variants, kind of similar to how the Chaos Knights have their expanded Wardog range. A close combat one could be fun for the Imperials. We could see entirely new classes of knights added in. Maybe a Psycho Knight for the Imperials could be a fun one, or a Siege Pattern Knight, just going down general 40k tropes. Though I still think that the single thing that I'd most want out of a Codex is to put the plastic Horus Heresy Knights in the Codex and not in the Imperial Armour download section, so we know that they're safe for the future. There's no real reason not to buy the models. The Chaos Knights have just as much potential as well. If there was a new Knight class, I guess it'd make sense for them both to get it. And they could certainly expand their Abhorrent kit once again. The Loyalists had 3 different expansions for that. They could add in a Chaos Knight special character, for example. Finally, for those 4 teasers, we have perhaps the most conspicuous one out of any of them, which is the Salamanders. The artwork that they showcased for this one is from an aggressor, making Vulcan proud by going and burning down a whole bunch of enemies. It does mean it's not any hint towards a Salamander's Gravis character or new unit or anything though. I feel like compared with the others, getting something Space Marine is perhaps the most unusual of the teasers. I mean, obviously not because Games Workshop like to sell Space Marines at every turn, but where all the others are probably just a standard Codex release, this one's going to be something a little bit different given that Space Marines already have their Codex for 10th edition. In general, Games Workshop do have a pattern for having a mid to late edition release for the Space Marines. They did the Shadow Spear box back in 8th edition where they had the Phobos Marines introduced in a big way, and that was paired with supplement books for the Codex chapters. And then in 9th edition we had Chapter Battle Forces with a character in leading a bunch of other things, and also the Strike Force Agastus box set with the Brutalis Dreadnought and everyone's favourite Desolation Marine missile launcher on missile launchers. It was kind of interesting that in 9th edition it seemed like they sort of changed course halfway through. There were some leaks and teasers that came out about the possibility of some supplement books for the Codex chapters, but then they never materialised, and the Discount Battle Force box sets they got sort of felt like they were supposed to be launch boxes for those same Codexes. But instead it seems like they came out just with miniatures in them, in a sort of weird double bill with all the regular Christmas battle forces all lumbered together. My suspicion at the time was that Games Workshop was initially planning to do them and then sort of ran out of time, or perhaps decided not to publish them in 9th edition, perhaps partly wanting to reduce backlash about printing loads of books that immediately got invalidated by 10th. In any case, given that it's specifically a Salamander that's teased here as opposed to an Ultramarine, I think it has more chance that it could be content for the more core Space Marine chapters, either in the form of multiple different books or perhaps one big expansion book for Codex Space Marines. It'd be really cool to have something to dig into them and make them more interesting in their own way rules-wise. It could even be just a Codex Space Marine 2.0, which they have done in a few different editions. They do like to do the occasional double dip and sell us rules twice in a row for their most collective range. It could be another big box set such as the Shadow Spear one with a whole bunch of different stuff, and then maybe even some digital content to go alongside it for the specific chapters. And it could be the possibility of some Primaris upgraded characters. In any case, a whole bunch of things that they could do for the Space Marines by the past precedent that they've set. I feel like there definitely seems like there's some possibility of getting a bunch more characters done in Primaris scale though. There were just a whole bunch of them that conspicuously survived the removal of all the fine cast resin miniatures from the first wave, things like Vulcan Hestan, Cato Sicarius, Pedro Cantor and Darnath Lysander, all really quite big characters for the lore that are important to their chapters. And to me it seemed that these were probably being earmarked for a plastic release at some point, particularly given that we've seen artwork of Primaris Cato Sicarius, so it certainly seemed like he would be coming. If they are doing a wave of content that is in some way core Codex Space Marine and expanding the other chapters focused, this would seem like the ideal time to release these. I don't know whether it'd be alongside other Battle Force box sets to push other models, or maybe alongside supplement books, or both or neither. I'm sure this will be of interest to a whole bunch of people given just how many people collect Space Marines, and any generic toys that they get will be shared out to the Divergent chapters as well. We also recently had the Space Marine Rumour engine for a sort of vehicle engine that they've got, which is similar to both the tank ones and smaller stuff. It could be a generic unit like an update for, say, the Vindicator or Whirlwind going on a Gladiator style chassis. or could be something smaller like a jet bike. I could see someone like Samael getting one, or even if we are going down the core Codex chapters, could be a White Scars character. I feel like the talking point for them is pretty consistently why no character on bike. Finally though, for Games Workshop teasers, last but not least, we had their silhouette that's going to be teasing the next thing for 40k. They said that this is the future, and they didn't really give us any sort of meaningful hints in the audio, so very much left it up to the community to find out what it was, and it seems that it was just instantly recognised, and I've seen people post about it on Reddit and things. It looks like rather than being a model silhouette, it's actually artwork, and it's this artwork of a couple of Primaris Space Wolves, looking like they're having a nice fight with each other in front of the Chapter Master. They didn't really say exactly how far in the future this would be, so it could be all the way up to 2026 as far as we know, but typically Games Workshop don't tend to hype things up more than 1 year in advance, so I feel like there's at least a reasonable chance that we get some Space Wolves in the sort of September-ish style release slot, maybe similar to when the Votann range launched in 9th. This one's different to the rest as it's a specific hype teaser. I think that's yet more evidence that the Space Wolves are getting a full range release, which Games Workshop had already given us absolutely loads of hints already so far in 10th edition, and they do also seem like a logical choice for it, given that we'd had Dark Angels and Blood Angels already this edition. The Space Wolves are the other one of the big 3 divergent ones that they've supported massively in the past. For the teasers and things that we've had for the Space Wolves, they seem to have been relentlessly posting about them on their social media. We had new artwork of Logan Grimnar, them mentioning Beyond the Fell-Handed at least twice, maybe 3 times, plus also weirdly having a specific Space Wolf promotional post trying to sell their old kits for them, presumably trying to wind down stock for them before they get replaced and the old ones get binned. On top of that, they just seem absolutely logical. It looks like Games Workshop's intention was the first 2 editions in the Primaris era to focus on generic units, and then really for this edition to really step into the next gear for their divergent chapters, giving unique Blood Angels, Dark Angels, and now apparently Space Wolf things as well. The other really obvious thing for timetabling is Lehman Russ. For Loyalist Primarchs to come back, he would be the next most obvious choice by a long way. There's definitely lots of others that could come back, but Lehman Russ makes most sense from a Games Workshop sales perspective, as unlike, say, Vulcan of the Salamanders, he's actually got an entire army range that's been established for a really long time, and like Lionel Johnson before him, it just makes him so much more likely to come back than the other ones. The only other more obvious choice would be Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, if he didn't happen to have an unfortunate accident at the end of the Horus Heresy. Otherwise, beyond that, Logan Grimnar hasn't had a miniature yet when Dante and Azrael both have, and I kind of wonder whether or not Lehman Russ will be coming along with an end-of-edition campaign in a similar sort of way to Lionel Johnson, but if they're hyping it now, then maybe it might be sooner than that. In any case, massive amounts of models that they could redo. I certainly expect something Wolfguard, either on foot or Terminators. Beyond the Fell-Handed seems to have had an unusual amount of teasers there, so probably he's going to get done. They'd have their own unique upgrade sprue, the same as the Dark Angels, Blood Angels and Black Templars, and beyond that they've got a massive amount of characters. There's quite a big choice there, and I guess they might not redo all of them at once, maybe having some of them saved for another time. In theory that's the end for the Games Workshop Codex roadmap, but given that that only leaves 2 codexes left on the agenda, it sort of makes sense that we can just add them on to the end of it, so we pretty much know the full codex release schedule for 10th edition near enough now. It looks like the only 2 that weren't hyped or teased in any way were Drukhari and the Leaguers of Votann, which maybe isn't the best news for those factions getting a codex anytime soon, at least unless they go against their teasers that they've done so far, but it might be good news in them getting more chance of having some model support, as typically for Games Workshop doing big faction releases, they tend to drop them towards the end of the edition, and the codexes that get saved towards the end of the edition are often ones that get a release wave. We had that back in 9th edition, where the Leagues of Votann, World Eaters and Guard were the last 3 codexes of 9th, and all of them came with a fairly good model release wave alongside. Both of these are really quite conspicuous for really needing a model release wave as well. The Drukhari have a bunch of things that have just straight out gone out of production. They need new grotesques, Yuri and Rakarth, a new version of the Court of the Archon and the Beastmaster. There's plenty of characters they could dig into if they wanted some supporting releases, and perhaps most notably of all, Asdrubal Vex could be a great centrepiece on his Days of Destruction. They really do enjoy putting big centrepiece character models at the heart of each army, and I feel like if they do go for a big Drukhari remake, then I think there's a reasonable chance that we'll see him. Again, could be a character of the sort of power tier that could be justified in an end of edition campaign. Finally, for the Leagues of Votann, they're almost certainly going to be getting a few more releases this edition. We've had a couple of rumour engines that look really quite specific for them, with things like a toolbox and a scanner projector type thing. I'd guess they won't get anywhere near as many kits as they did the first time around, but still should hopefully expand their roster. Lots of hopes for them, including this jump pack unit where we saw one of them teased. It just seems unlikely they won't have a full squad of them coming. and other things for community speculation. It just seems likely that they could get a big walker of some sort, as it would just fit in well with their aesthetic. It could either be a crude mech or a robot, and maybe some sort of fast attack speeder could be a nice one for them as well, maybe a bigger version of their hover bikes. These guys might well be towards the end of the year or even early 2026 for all we know. But either way, overall it does still look like it's going to be a pretty massively busy year for Warhammer 40k in 2025. It seems like there's definitely going to be more releases versus 2024, just given that we're having 3 major release ones right at the start, never mind anything else that we get, like some Space Dwarves in the mid to late of the year. In any case, let me know your thoughts, ideas and speculations down in the comments below. Feel free to point anything out that I might have missed as well, I'm sure there'll be some things. What are your hopes and fears for the Codex release waves in Warhammer 40k this year? As mentioned, a massive thank you to Warhaus as well for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check them out if you live down under in Australia. I'll leave their web store linked in the video description if you want to pick up something as like the Deathcore of Krieg box at a big 23% off Games Workshop's normal excessive prices down there. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. And if you'd like to support the channel as well, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. You can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help keep these coming. The Patreon page gets a few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, voting on certain videos to come next, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways, including the February one for the Big Knight household, and the March one which will be for 8 copies of the Emperor's Children box set. Feel free to check it out, linked in the video description if you'd like to see any of that. In any case though, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.